Ողջույն, Բուն TV-ի եթերում Դիլեմա հաղորդաշարն է եւ ես Արեգ Քոչինյանն եմ։ Այսօրվա մեր հյուրը Հնդկաստանից մեր գործընկեր, փորձագետ, աշխարհակական եւ ռազմական հարցերով էքսպերտ Սվաստի Ռաուն է։ Այսօրվա հաղորդումը մենք վարելու ենք անգլերեն լեզվով, հայերեն ենթագրերով։ Hello dear Swasti, it is my absolute pleasure to be the host of today's conversation. This is our first time that we're having an expert from India. And I think our public would be very much interested to understand a lot about first Indian geopolitical situation,
right?
Its relations with Pakistan and the recent conflict that there was there, and then we will approach the Armenia-India cooperation and the futures for that. So first thing that I would like to ask you to tell us about is the origins of the conflict of India with Pakistan and overall the geopolitical situation around India.
So first of all, thanks for having me here, Arek, and I've heard so much about your show, so I'm actually quite thrilled to be here and also represent India for the first ever time to Armenian people. So thank you for the honor. Too. Yeah, and as you rightly said, that India and Pakistan seem to be locked into a conflict which is actually very layered and complex. So I think a lot of people do not understand, especially outside of India, that the roots of this conflict is not about Kashmir being an independent region where India and Pakistan are vying for some kind of an ownership. That's a completely wrong way of looking at the problem of Kashmir. You know, it actually all started when India and Pakistan became two separate nations in 1947, you know, when the subcontinent finally was free from colonial rule and India became an independent country. And then a part of that, of our land was ceded and, you know, made into a separate country, which is Pakistan. So the problem of Kashmir is very complex because Kashmir, you know, there was back in the day, and I'll just try to simplify it for your viewers. So back in the day, there was a process, a legal process by which the different princely states in India were given a choice to accede either to Pakistan or to Kashmir or to India. And in the case of Kashmir, the ruler acceded to India, but you know, it happened at a time when there were already tensions simmering, and as a result, you know, we had the first attack from Pakistan around the same time, and ever since this particular problem has been a bit of a, how do I say, a very, very sore spot for India, because Pakistan has always tried to, you know, not only lay ownership to Kashmir, also reject that very instrument of accession that the ruler of Kashmir signed for joining India. But frankly, Pakistan has never really honored any UN brokered, you know, mediation, any ceasefire. So we have had successive, you know, such attempts, and all the way to 1971. I want to sort of, you know, fast forward it because it becomes easier to understand. When India and Pakistan fought another war. I mean, we and Pakistan have fought big wars and small wars, but in 1971 was a turning point because that also led to the liberation of the state of Bangladesh, actually, which was earlier East Pakistan. So South Asia and the Southern Asian region is an extremely volatile region. But in 1971, which is a war that India supported the liberation of Bangladesh and Pakistan lost, in that war we signed Simla agreement, and according to the Simla agreement, you know, we made sure that the Kashmir issue needs to be resolved bilaterally. The Kashmir issue will not have a third-party intervention, and you know, and we will not. I mean, both the parties will not resort to any aggressive means or any violent means. But you know, the state of Pakistan has somehow put its entire rationale on the problem of Kashmir. So for them, if you have noticed what the Pakistani successive prime ministers and successive army chiefs have said, they have always said that Kashmir is their jugular vein, which means that, you know, it is the reason, it is the logic of Kashmir which keeps the entire state alive. And anyway, cutting a long story short, I mean, Pakistan has always tried to internationalize the problem of Kashmir at UN and all these places where it is backed by countries like China. On the other hand, India has always gone back and alluded to the Simla agreement of 1971, saying that we have mutually decided to keep it bilateral. And besides, in 2019, we basically changed the status of the constitutional status of Kashmir, and we sort of, you know, we integrated Kashmir with the rest of India. So that is called the abrogation of the Article 370, which was an internal article of the Indian constitution. And Pakistan ever since has tried tried everything possible to internationalize the issue, etc. But the problem is not just internationalization, because that sounds like a diplomatic thing. The real problem happens because Pakistan for many, many decades has been trying to harbor terrorism into India. In fact, terrorism has become a part of Pakistan's statecraft. You know, it's like the gray zone statecraft to just keep the Indian state destabilized, particularly in the region of Kashmir. So I think this is one thing that perhaps the international audiences do not understand very well, because the way sometimes they understand is that Kashmir is some kind of a region where both parties are laying claim. I mean, that's a completely wrong way. So in the decade of 90s particularly, militancy was very, very poor, very, very terrible. And ever since, India has taken many counter-terrorism efforts. We have really invested a lot in counterterrorism activities, the counterterrorism grid out there to try and sort of eradicate it. But what we have seen with the state of Pakistan is that they have changed their means. So, for example, the style of militancy that we saw happening in the decade of 90s has now changed. And what we have seen Pakistan doing is, perpetrating different kind of terror activities. So, starting from 2001, an attack on our parliament, after which we launched an operation. It was called Operation Parakram. Then in 2008, there was an attack on our in Mumbai through the sea, and it was terrible because many people died, and there was the terrorists just opened fire and they came to a 5-star hotel. So that was very, very scary. After 2008, after that we've had in 2016 they killed our special forces, about 20 or so of them. Then again we launched surgical strikes on them, and then 2019 they did again, and they're killing about 44 or 45 of our armed forces personnel, and then again we launched surgical strikes all the way to 22nd April 2025 when they perpetrated the attack on Pahalgam. So what I'm saying is that this is nothing new. And Pakistan has only changed the ways in which it kind of harbors terrorism into India. So of late, the frequency has dropped a little bit, but every few years there is a big attack from Pakistan. And of course, the state of Pakistan is complicit, because these terrorists, they say that, the Pakistani state doesn't really support them. But, where was Osama bin Laden found? I mean, Pakistan's culpability in terror activities is well known all over the world. And there is a footprint of Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba. And this is a complex story, but I'm making this effort to actually tell this to the Armenian people, that we have been a victim of this terror attack for many decades. And in the last couple of decades, India has also changed the way we deal. So very quickly, for many decades, India has done the dossier diplomacy, going to United Nations and going to bigger world powers and showing them evidence. But frankly, nothing much has changed, because they have not really stopped bailing out Pakistan. The IMF has not stopped bailing out Pakistan. Even recently, after the Pahalgam attack, when we launched the Operation Sindhuur, which is the recent military escalation that you probably see. It was right during that operation that we were, doing, which lasted about 88 hours. We saw Pakistan getting yet another 1 billion IMF bailout. So I think in many ways, it is also a failure of the international community to really understand Pakistan's complicity. And the idea is not to ask for evidence or not ask for evidence. I mean, the footprint of the Pakistani state on this is so many decades old that anybody that studies the region probably knows that where the problem lies. So very quickly, I mean, my last point is that yes, we have launched a very successful operation against the Pakistani terrorist, sites. We identified about 24 terrorist sites across 9 locations in Pakistan, and on the 9th of 7th May, which is not very, very far away, we launched what is called the Operation Sindhuur, when in retaliation of Pakistan for the first time in many decades, entering deep into Indian territory, segregating the tourists out there on the basis of religion and killing the Hindu Indian nationals. So that was something which really shocked the nation. So Operation Sindhur has happened, and after Operation Sindhur, as you know, that we have also dispatched some all-party parliamentary, committees to different parts of the world in order to sort of uprise and tell the international community that India's fight against terror is not just India's fight, but it's a global fight, and basically try and have a meaningful conversation about how to go about this counterterrorism problem. Because, look at India. India today is already the world's fourth largest economy, and India's 1.5 billion people. We are pioneers in so many things. Indian engineers are the ones that are building the Silicon Valley. We are a big defense industry player. We are so important in the region of Indo-Pacific. It's just very, very strange that because of Pakistan's activities, we are constantly being pulled back into, a very problematic kind of a response, mechanism that we do not want to, because we want to live very peacefully with Pakistan. So this is the military escalation in short, because it's very difficult to tell you what happened in 70, 80 years. But in short, this is where we are.
Okay. During your speech, you mentioned China.
Yeah.
And I would say that there is this general understanding in Armenia that China has a lot to do with the conflict and with Pakistan's capabilities of attacking India and generally the military part of the story from the view of Pakistan. Could you please elaborate us first? What's the Chinese interest in all of the story, and second, how does China specifically help Pakistan?
So let's just start by telling the viewers that China has real stakes in this. A lot of people probably only understand this as a geopolitical competition between India and China, which is also the case, but it is not the only case. When Pakistan had its first, war against India, they took away, and we call it, the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. So a part of Kashmir is with Pakistan, and what Pakistan has done over the years is that Pakistan has ceded a part from that occupied Kashmir to China, which is called the Shaksgam Valley, which is a very strategically located place. And China over the years have built military bases there. So they are breathing down India's neck, in that sense. And of course, I'm sure I need to at this point also tell that just as we have a disturbed border with Pakistan over Kashmir, we also have a very long disturbed border with an undisputed border with China. And this is not only in one sector, but the entire border with China is basically disputed at three main sectors. So there is a northern sector, the middle sector, and the eastern sector. And it's about many 2,500 kilometers of disputed border over which we have again fought wars. So I think it is, as you understand, it is completely in China's geopolitical, geostrategic interest to always prop up Pakistan and to keep India destabilized there because of the border dispute being one. The second is that, Arik, what has happened is, if you've been noticing China's rise, China's rise has been very meteoric after the 90s, as it got more and more entrenched into the global order and became a part of the WTO, etc., and became basically the manufacturing capital of the world, capitalizing on all positivities of the globalized world. So very quickly, China right now thinks of there is a difference in the strategic worldview. China looks at Asia and the larger Indo-Pacific that they call Asia-Pacific as China-led. So they talk about a unipolar Asia/Asia-Pacific, which is obviously China-led. India has a different strategic worldview. It talks about a multipolar Asia and a multipolar Indo-Pacific. And these two worldviews are actually very they're diametrically opposite, because it doesn't, for China, it's a zero-sum game. It can only be China there. For India, it is not a zero-sum game because India believes in building collaborative frameworks. And India, as you know, is not a part of any alliance either. India is a country that multi-aligns. So China has clear stakes in making sure that India's rise in the subcontinent remains contained. And there are also other things. I told you about the border dispute as well. But very quickly, in this particular situation, what has happened is that for the longest time, it was United States that was the biggest military supplier to Pakistan, but all of that changed in the 90s when Pakistan tested its nuclear weapons, and whatever was remaining really went down the drain after the 2001 9/11 attacks, because then it was very clear that Osama bin Laden and, that story. So after that, the one power that has risen meteorically in Pakistan's defense industry modernization is China. And in fact, today, going by the CIPRI data, which of course is a very standardized data that everybody in the international scenario takes seriously, China already accounts for more than 80% of Pakistani weapons today. But that's not the only problem.
So that's almost everything.
Almost everything. And whatever is remaining is actually given by Turkey. So basically,
that was my next question.
Yes. So, but first, let's just talk about China. And in this particular conflict, what has happened is that a couple of things, and they need a bit of a elaboration. So, while we have always known that China is up to doing what it's doing, the thing with Chinese weapons so far, Arik, was that they were not battle tested. So while the Turkish weapons have been battle tested against Armenia, Azerbaijan, and then in the Russia-Ukraine war, but Chinese weapons have not really been battle tested in that sense. But this particular the kind of military escalation that we saw after Operation Sindhur was where we saw that, the Chinese have not only given the JF-17, but also the J-10s, and now they're planning to give the J-35s, which is the deliveries are supposed to come sometime in August, and of course that's a different thing. But what we really saw technically, that the Chinese and the Pakistanis have joined hands in a technically, technically, it's a very, very deep relationship where the Chinese provided PL-17, PL-15 missiles, okay? They have been able to extend their ranges in a way that really shows a very deep level of operational data links, which in military technology is where the modern warfare is going to look like, because modern wars are not going to cross into each other's territory, but staying into their defenses of your own respective, and also strike with the beyond visual range missiles, so the BVR missiles. So for the BVR missiles to work, if you find out a way to extend their ranges that the Chinese did, that is really a matter of concern. And we have shot down one PL-15, and there is a reason why France and Japan and the United States want to study the remnant of the PL-15, because we want to get a know-how of how really China is developing those weapons. So very quickly, in this particular conflict, the military support from China was very evident, very clear, and not just in numbers, not just in quantity, but also qualitatively. That was very, very alarming in the sense that they have a very deep technological cooperation that has perhaps now manifested. So in many ways for us, this was a kind of a tip of an iceberg to really understand what is going on in that ecosystem as to how deep they are.
One short question here. During the Armenia-Azerbaijan war, we have seen for several times when Azerbaijan wasn't ready to use the sophisticated technology that Turkey provided to Azerbaijan. That's why we have seen operational support from Turkey, where officers, specialists on ground were actually helping Azerbaijan. Can you also say that whether that was the situation with Pakistan? Was there also an operational support from China?
I don't think there was an operational support from China right during the 88 hours of Operation Sindhur, because here we are only talking about 88 hours.
Yes.
But we all know that Pakistani Air Force pilots have been training, and not now, from very early on. So they have been training for the J-10s, and they are now training for the J-35s. And this is not coming because of the escalation with India, but this has been going on. And the Pakistani engineers have a huge role to play in, for example, other developments that China and Turkey are doing. So in this particular conflict, we do not have any evidence of Chinese engineers being on the Pakistani soil, if that's what you mean. But for every other, reason, there is evidence enough to believe that, yes, they are being trained in ways that should be a matter of concern for India.
Now let's switch to another supporter of Pakistan, which you already mentioned, Turkey. First, what's the Turkish interest in all of the story, and how big is this support?
No, Arik, that's a great question, because, we all know that after Erdogan has come, and Erdogan has been peddling a certain kind of political Islam in Turkey, trying to claim the leadership of the Muslim world, etc. We all know about that part. So from that respect, we do understand that a political figure like Erdogan would always be more than willing to support a regime like Pakistan for the obvious reasons. And what we have also seen is that Turkey has also been consistently supporting Pakistan on the matter of Kashmir. And this comes from the 2019 abrogation of Article 370, when even the Taliban-controlled Afghanistan did not condemn it. But Turkey, of course, did. And over the years, India and Turkey do not have any problem, apart from the fact that Turkey is always trying to prop up the Islamist regimes, in South Asia. And in 2019, Turkey came up with an Asia and New policy, which is by and large looking at developing strategic and defense ties with all Islamic countries in Asia. So it doesn't cover India. Okay, so Turkey's Asia EU doesn't have, it has an India-sized gap. And it's just strange because how can you talk about South Asia and not talk about India? So that was the time when Turkish defense industry started to, develop these ties with the Pakistanis. And by the way, it's not just China that is the biggest defense supplier to both Pakistan and Bangladesh. The second biggest supplier to both Pakistan and Bangladesh is Turkey. Okay, so Turkey's interest very quickly, I think, two. One, of course, is the defense industry per se, because defense industry, that their economy is not doing well, but their defense industry is more robust, and that way. The second is certainly, Turkey for some reason has come out unequivocally in support of Pakistan over the matter of Kashmir. And since this is about Kashmir, so it kind of falls into the broader design of Erdogan's, strategic outlook. But it's a loss, because obviously he's got a lot to gain if you were with India. So it's a lose-lose approach. But even then, Turkey is there, standing very steady and tall behind Pakistan.
How extensive is this support?
So very quickly, we know that it's basically drones, first of all.
Bayraktars?
But yes, of course. So what the Indian, the PIB, which is the official communication, has from time to time, they have shared a lot of details about the Operation Sindhur, operational details, of Operation Sindhur, and also what kind of weapons have been used, what kind of weapons have been intercepted. Now, for sure, it's not about everything, because we do not want to give away everything. And also, please understand that technically speaking, the Operation Sindhur is still ongoing. Okay, it's just been paused because a kind of a tactical ceasefire. In fact, we didn't call it ceasefire. Donald Trump called it ceasefire. Yes. And then we were really surprised as to why did he make it sound so strange, because that is never, it was all done bilaterally. Okay. But long story short, we did at the DGMO level, there was a cessation of violence and so that's the paused state of Operation Sindhur, and the operational details are withheld also because it's an ongoing operation. But very quickly, based on what the PIB releases have shown from Turkey, they've been the Bayraktar TB2s, but the Bayraktar TB2s are also quite basic, because once the other side's air defenses go active, the Bayraktar TB2s can't do much. So they've been also the Bayraktar Akinci drones, which are much more, they also build on sophisticated. Yes. Then also the Songar, and we saw swarms of the Songar's drones coming, and a variety of those kind of drones. So when it came to drones, it was really the Turkish drones all over Indian skies, and they were, of course, they were shot down. But the point is that we did notice that the purpose of sending those drone swarms was also for collecting intelligence and finding out the locations of RADs, etc., etc. So we could see that Turkey is playing not a passive but a very active role in how to sort of help with these things. And I'm sure when more operational details come out, we will perhaps see whether Turkish engineers were, in a drone pilots were helping the Pakistanis like in a real-time scenario. We do not have evidence to say that right now, but it might come out, because a lot of those drones, that's a matter of concern. That's all I can say right now, because the operational details, 100% of those details are still withheld. So, but basically what we saw from Turkey was drones. But from China, it was not just the PL-15, but also the satellite support. So, yeah.
Since we've talked a lot about the region, can you describe us briefly the regional consist of the region of Kashmir? Because it creates questions. Why is Pakistan so obsessed with the region?
Okay, very quickly. That's a great question. Everybody wonders. Why is Pakistan? What is Pakistan getting out of it? Pakistan is, I have described it that way in my writings, that Pakistan is a state which is perpetually failing, but never failed enough to completely disintegrate. So Pakistan is put together on the idea that Hindus and Muslims cannot live together. That is basically the idea of the founding father of Pakistan. Then Hindus and Muslims, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, then Hindus and Muslims are two different nations. And if I just tell you how ridiculous that argument is, because at the time of partition, there were more Muslims living in India than they were living in Pakistan, and they continued living in India even after the exodus.
Even now, there are more Muslims in India than in Pakistan, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a very ridiculous argument, one. B, the other thing with Pakistan is that what you think of the Pakistani state is actually predominantly dominated by the Punjabi community. So, inside of Pakistan, there are a lot of tensions, lot of, separatist movements like the Baloch insurgency. The Balochi people are very unhappy with the Pakistani domination. I already told you about the 1971 war when the Bengali Muslims wanted their own state and they created one.
The Bangladesh
that we supported, okay? And that led to a very humiliating defeat of Pakistan. And not just that, that also became the point when India started having very deep ties with the Soviet Union because Soviet Union supported, but that's a different part of the story. Coming back, it's, the Baloch insurgency, there is a Sindh insurgency, there is also a Pashtun insurgency, because I don't know if a lot of people know that Pakistan and Afghanistan also have a border dispute. It's called the Durand Line, and that line is on the Pashtun nationalism. So what I'm saying is that Pakistan is a failed state because look at India. I mean, India, I told you, in every which way, I mean, look at the size of our economy, everything. There's no comparison. And Pakistan for the Pakistani army, and by the way, you must also know that nobody is elected in Pakistan. The political leaders are not elected. They are selected. And they are selected by the army. Okay, so Pakistan's elections are not elections, they are selections, because army chief is what actually calls the shots. And in fact, there was a joke, for a while, for many years, that only 3 A's rule Pakistan. So 3 A's is Allah, America, and the army. Okay. But that is back in the day when America
America is not there anymore.
America is anymore, so we will have to change that, that expression. But what I'm saying is that it's basically done by the army. Okay. And for the Pakistani army, every time they have an existential crisis, let's say there is an economic problem, of course, Pakistani economy is faltering like anything. They are surviving on bailouts. They are surviving from one bailout package to another bailout package, So the Chinese, I mean, you just have to dig a little bit to understand that they are running for bailouts to China. They're running to bailouts for, to Turkey, for bailouts to Saudi Arabia, to UAE, to IMF, everywhere, okay? Because they have convinced all these players that they are also fighting a major problem against terrorism. So in order to keep on with their fight, they want to be bailed out. Yeah. But it doesn't make sense because Pakistan is not really, even a decently managed economy. So every time there is an existential crisis for the state of Pakistan, the Pakistani army has to do something against India in order to rally the public opinion behind them. So if you understand it well, I mean, you can totally picture in your mind that there is a state that has nothing much to look forward to. An army controls everything. There is this widening gap between the rich and the poor. In fact, there is no middle class in Pakistan, frankly. And when they want to survive, all these criticisms that they get about not handling the Baloch insurgency well, not handling the Pashtun insurgency well, etc., they do something on Kashmir, and India has to retaliate. And then they say, look, you have a threat from India, so you please queue up behind us. And that's exactly what happens. And because if you see carefully, if you analyze what has happened in Pakistan, is that after Operation Sindhuur, I mean, we destroyed their 24 sites and we destroyed more than 10, 11 of their bases in the second part, okay? The Pakistani army chief promoted himself to the rank of a field marshal and gave a narrative where Pakistan has won the war. I mean, they are certainly living in a simulation. It's a complete parallel reality. I mean, they fail to see what they are doing, and that's how they control their populations. It's it's like that.
Especially after the last attacks on India, what is the Azerbaijani standing on the conflict?
Well,
and how is it seen from New Delhi?
So very quickly, I mean, what we saw, and this is a matter of concern for us, that I would not mince my words to say that for India, we did not really see unequivocal support from our partners, primarily due to the fact that this time around, we could not give evidence enough to link the Pahalgam attack to the state of Pakistan, unlike the previous times when there was evidence, we caught the terrorist or, we caught the people behind it, somebody claimed responsibility, etc. This time around, there was a problem, but then that also has a technological reason because we have already found out that the applications that those terrorists were using are actually make it very, very difficult to track. Okay, so I mean, there are technical reasons. It's not to say that we will not find the evidence, but in the short term, it was difficult to actually come up with evidence. So what we saw for India, that everybody expressed solidarity with India, everybody condemned the terror attack, but nobody really linked it to the state of Pakistan, right? And that's what India said, that all right, we don't need anybody's validation and we need to do what we need to do. So this is our war, okay? And we went ahead and did it. On the contrary, Pakistan got unequivocal, clear, unambiguous support from China, Turkey, and Azerbaijan. Okay. Now, Azerbaijan, in that respect, in that theater, is a very small player. And Azerbaijan comes when the minute you say Azerbaijan, of course, you certainly will have to bring in Armenia, and that is because India and Armenia have become very, very close partners after 2020, and especially since we are now your biggest defense supplier. So, of course, Azerbaijan is mighty. Upset about it, and for them, they are deepening their ties with Pakistan, with Turkey. There is good enough literature on it in terms of the technical military cooperation as well as joint exercises, etc. And you can totally see that there is a geopolitical divide which is sort of growing in the Caucasus. I know that right now Armenia is also trying to stabilize its relationship because it's a landlocked country, etc. But what I'm saying is that Azerbaijan coming in direct support of Pakistan was also something that we noticed, and we could see why is that so. I think it's a bad strategy. It is certainly in Azerbaijani interest to have a more balanced approach. Okay. Yeah.
Since we already opened the topic of the India-Armenia relations, you just mentioned that India became the biggest supplier of arms for Armenia. Simultaneously, Armenia became the biggest foreign purchaser of the Indian weaponry in the world.
Yeah.
So this is by itself already creating some special relation between Armenia and India.
Yes.
I would say that a lot of people were pretty much surprised with this sudden raise of the relations between Armenia and India. And as you mentioned, that started pretty much from the 2021.
Yeah,
we can also extend
right.
it to 2020, but the main sort of characteristics of the current relationship are going back to 2021. Since then, a lot was done, and mainly was done in the military technical part of the cooperation, which by extent brought also some level of military educational part of the conversation. What else, in your opinion, can be done? And then we'll go to the more political part of the conversation.
So, you rightly mentioned that, Armenia, after 2020, 2021, has actually is right now having a very unique space in India's defense cooperation, okay? Now, this is not only got to do with the fact that we are exporting to Armenia. What we also have to understand, what makes Armenia so special for India, is that India has always had this reputation of being a net weapons importer. In fact, world's largest weapons importer, okay? And for decades, we have been dependent completely on the Soviet Union first and then Russia. And of late, especially under the current dispensation, we have done extremely fundamental changes to change our procurement policies, and we are trying to diversify. We're also trying to make in India, etc. What makes Armenia special is that there is a stated goal of the MOD that we want to emerge from a net weapons importer to a net weapons exporter. So for that, we are exporting a variety of now weapons, okay? So more than 51% of our defense equipment, export of defense equipment actually goes to the United States, and then it goes to France. But the key difference there is that what we are exporting to these advanced countries, they are mostly, secondary equipment and, dual-use technology and parts and so on and so forth. They are not really complete platforms. And that is where Armenia becomes so special, because Armenia is the only country in the world right now that is buying almost everything that India is making. In fact, that example is now given to Indian Armed Forces, that there is an equipment that Armenia is buying, but you are not placing orders for. So it's that special. Okay. And the only other parallel that I can give you is perhaps for the BrahMos cruise missiles that we co-produce with Russia, that we are selling to Philippines and Vietnam. But it's just, one such success story. In the case of Armenia, it's different. It's like you completely see the media reports on the Pinakas, the Swatis. It's like the whatever we make, right?
Yes,
so you're buying. So very quickly, of course, it also posits India as a serious defense manufacturer because all that equipment is made in India. Second is that if you notice that for us, this particular standoff with Pakistan also was in many ways a celebration of just how well our indigenously developed weapons worked, and especially the Akash air defense systems and our indigenously developed drones, okay? So this kind of a relationship is very important because it also gives an opportunity for India then to showcase the efficacy of its weapons, which are not as expensive as the Western platforms, but are as competitive.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that is what makes it very, very special.
One more question here. In this kind of relationship, the biggest concern usually people are having is about the sustainability of the relations and the sustainability of the production consumption lines, let's say. First, how sustainable do you think are these new relations between Armenia and India? And second, how sustainable do you think the production consumption lines are?
So let me just answer the first question first, which is a very, 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 I think a very genuine question, because I mean, if it is just about filling a little gap, then once that particular geopolitical moment passes, there wouldn't be any need for you to sort of look at India, right? And that's where I think we need to broaden up and open up this conversation, because Armenia, yes, it is true that right now defense industry, the technical military cooperation is the mainstay of our relations with you. But for sure, I mean, Armenia is also a strategic gateway for India into the Caucasus and into Europe and this part of the world, because, and here I should bring in the value of connectivity, because if you carefully see, India has invested a lot in the INSTC, which is the International North-South Trade Corridor, which is starting from India and then going all the way from Iran, and then it crosses Armenia and then goes into Russia. So India has also recently... Yes. I mean, of course, and to Europe. I mean, that's the route. But once it reaches Armenia, then of course it can do a lot of things. So, and by the way, this is coming in a parallel development to India developing more strategic gateways into Europe anyway, especially through the Mediterranean arc. So this is also a time when our Prime Minister is going to Marseille in France, talking about Mumbai-Marseille connectivity. And as I mean, I do a lot of work on connectivity, and I've been arguing that, of course, I mean, why just Marseille? Marseille is still in the western side of the Mediterranean, but also the key strategic port of Trieste in Italy, where we already have Indian presence, and then coming to Greece, which is another very, very important, not just a strategic partner, but also an important partner for you as well.
Exactly.
Okay.
By the way, small question here: is there a strategic partnership between India and Greece formulated?
Yes. India and Greece have signed a strategic partnership very recently. Okay, and another strategic partnership in Europe that India has signed very recently has been with Poland. Okay, and I sincerely hope that India and Armenia also sign a strategic partnership.
That's definitely a line I completely agree with you, and here I would like to make a short intervention. I think that should be the aim for the both ministries. I definitely see an appetite for it from the Armenian side to have prepared and signed a strategic partnership with India, especially given that we've just done it with the US. We're currently preparing one with the France. We're preparing one with the EU. So that's definitely a genuine interest of Armenia, and definitely we need to conceptualize the relations that are being formed.
So I agree. I mean, just to now sort of just fill in those blanks, the point is that Armenia is. So I was just telling you that India is extremely serious about developing its strategic footprint all over the world, but also in this particular region, because we feel that it's been underutilized. I mean, there is $200 billion worth of trade with the EU in goods and services, but we are now just about to finalize an FTA with, and you can totally understand that this is going to expand. So basically, all our trade to the EU right now is actually routed only through three main ports of Rotterdam, Hamburg, and Antwerp, and all our western side.
So all are through the oceanic routes.
Yeah, and also not the oceanic route, but also concentrated in the western part of Europe. And you have in the Central and East European countries a situation where China's 17+1 mechanism has not worked very well. Okay, and they are looking for more diversification. They love India. I mean, India is a trustworthy partner anyway. So this is also friendshoring. So like I said, that in Trieste, and then you look at Thessaloniki, because Piraeus, of course, has a lot of Chinese control in Greece. So the long and short is that India is looking, and as if you see Indian government's maneuvers, in this region, you see that India is trying to develop more strategic gateways into all these port cities, trying to mark its presence there, leave its footprint there, which has an economic dividend, of course, but also has a strategic dividend in terms of trying to helping these countries diversify away from China. And in this particular context, because India believes in building complementarities and not really counters. India does not believe in a zero-sum game. So our point is, as we are looking at IMEC and as we are looking at other routes, we are also looking at INSTC, right? So INSTC, Armenia, is absolutely essential, for making that work. We have already tried to get the Chabahar, into the SCO, etc. We have tried to link that to INSTC. So again, And it is for this reason that we are negotiating, and we already have a framework of India, Iran, and Armenia trilateral, through which we are trying to. So, from India's perspective, of course, when you talk about the defense cooperation, yes, it is true that we sort of filled that immediate need for you when you needed it the most. But if you look at it in the long term, I think India can be an indispensable partner for really helping you maintain that resilience. Okay, that's one part. So defense is not just about fighting a war. Defense is also about, you know, having a resilience. Okay, yeah. So that's one part, and it's not just India alone, because we know that France is the number 2 defense supplier to you. You know, Greece and you also have a lot of technical military cooperation, and these are partners that we also work very closely with. So I know that you signed a defense agreement in 2024 with Greece and Cyprus, and you know what I'm saying is that there's so many overlaps that it is not just about defense industry, it's also about the military exercises, the joint exercises, you know, and all of that. So I think
the geostrategic interests being so close to each other, the position on the geostrategic
so close, yeah. So very quickly, defense is one part, and like I said, that can be sort of entrenched in a much more stable manner, notwithstanding the importance of the last few years. I mean, it can always, like I said, it can mature into something.
That's
like
the right word, I think, that we were looking for. These relations have to mature further.
Yes, mature, and then, you know, we have to sort of posit ourselves in building Armenia's resilience, and one. And on the other hand, India actually also stands to gain from all the normalization that you are now attempting, because like I said, that India has genuine interest in sort of, you know, making its trade routes work. And I already told you about the trilateral that we have. So from India's perspective, I mean, we are not here to sort of destabilize the region. I mean, we are here to try and protect as much of a rules-based order as we can, because that's what we do in the Indo-Pacific as well. Okay, I mean, India is the only big country in the world, if you notice, and this is, I'm not saying this because I'm Indian, I genuinely say it as an objective analyst, that India is the only big country in the world whose rise has not been destabilizing. Okay, so we can bring genuine, you know, strategic, I would say, capital in this part of the world, and we stand to gain from your normalization. So we would always support that as well.
Great to hear. Now, the second question was about the sustainability of the production consumption lines.
Okay.
How sustainable are the production capabilities in India? And for example, how likely are larger destabilization possibilities in the region?
So I'll just give you certain figures for you to understand how serious India is. Now, India has been under a lot of criticism by a lot of Indians, including myself, that we are not spending enough on defense, right? So until now, we are spending close to 1.9 to 2% of defense. This is just before, you know, the military standoff with Pakistan happened, and now we are spending a little more than 2%. But Indian GDP is huge, so the argument is that we have to increase our defense spending. But if you look at the defense spending per se, yes, it is also true that there is a lot of push for, you know, within the defense spending. There is salaries, there is, you know, pensions. There's also capital procurement. So we want to increase the share for the capital procurement. But if you look at the increased share of the capital procurement, which is quite, I would say, decent by all measures. I mean, I'm not saying that it shouldn't grow. It should grow, but even where it is right now, 75% of that is for indigenized, you know, defense production, which basically means to say that India is investing and has been investing, you know, year by year, we've been investing more and more into domestic production, because like I said, that not many people understand that the stated goal of the Indian MOD has been very clear. Until last year, we actually kind of surprised everybody by exporting 24,000 crore worth of defense equipment. And we aim for taking it up to 50,000 crore of defense equipment, okay, which is indigenously made. So yes, India will procure from foreign partners. There are certain areas where we definitely have certain shortfalls, especially, you know, fighter jets. Of course, we have our programs, but we need to also make for the shortfalls. But for all of these varieties that we have very successfully produced, you know, telling you this data is to basically help you understand is that it is not a one-off thing that we made once and we sold once and we are happy. There is a systemic push within the military bureaucracy, within our defense ecosystem, to make sure that the lion's share of our capital procurement is given to indigenous production. So this is going to stay.
There can be a lot else to discuss, but since we are short on time, I have one last exercise, let's say, that I want for us to do together. Let us imagine what we would like to see as a development in the Armenia-India relations in the upcoming 3 years.
Okay.
The first thing that I would recommend for those who are listening to us is definitely signing the strategic partnership agreement between the countries.
Yeah.
What else would you recommend?
A 2+2 mechanism can also work well, because a 2+2 mechanism is something that we have actually copied from the Japanese.
Okay.
The Japanese have this 2+2 approach to things. 2+2 basically, and India doesn't have a 2+2 with a lot of partners. India has 2+2.
What does it mean, 2+2?
2+2 is the foreign minister and the defense minister of one country and the foreign minister and defense ministry of your country. They have their own 2+2 specialized meetings. Okay. So this is a 2+2 format that we have with very few countries in the world, including US, Russia, Japan, Australia, UK, and the only exception here is France. That is a very important strategic partner, but the ties are so excellent that we never felt the need of a 2+2. Okay, so I think as you said, strategic partnership is one, but strategic partnership can again have multiple deliverables. So the 2+2 mechanism tries to sort of refine it a little bit more, to talk about the strategic component and the defense component a little bit more in a distilled manner. So I think 2+2 mechanism would be a good addition to that. The third, like I said, that I think we can also have a kind of a plurilateral approach, that approach that India comes with France and Germany, France and Greece, okay, to have a more robust cooperation, not just of defense industry, but like I said, of joint exercises, of,
So for lateral format of conversation.
We could do that. And third, I think we can really work with each other's diaspora. And I'm not even coming to trade, because trade has grown, but it is nothing. It is 400 million. It's nothing. There's immense potential for that to grow, and that's why we are interested in connectivity.
So here, another thing could be these B2B conversations and cooperation. We have to visit each other's business conferences, and the business community should work definitely more together, but also the civil societies. Yeah,
of course. I mean, I cannot overstate the fact that, there is a reason why, I happen to be the first guest from India, despite us having such deep cooperation, because we really do not have the kind of ties that we need to have between the civil society, organizations, between scholars. Now it started to emerge, but then there is so much potential. Okay, there's never a shortfall. There will never be a shortfall. But just one thing I would still like to mention here. I lost the train of my thoughts. What was the last thing I wanted to mention?
Well, you remember that another sort of column of our cooperation, which is not so much discussed amongst the realism or the realist policymakers, is the civilizational element. Armenia and India are ancient civilizations, are ancient cultures, rich cultures. This is a luxury not so many people can talk about and can be proud of.
No, for sure. That's what I have argued always, is that Armenia has always been like a low-hanging fruit for us to actually enter the Caucasus, okay, in a very meaningful way. And this has not just got to do with your war. It's just that the war became a very immediate reason,
catalyzer,
a kind of a catalyzer. But it's not that that's all we have to talk about.
Of course.
There's much. And also, like I said, that I think if you may be aware that we are also developing a lot of these joint ventures. I think joint ventures is also something that's not just about state-of-the-art weapon platforms, but in so many things. And for example, in dual-use technology, where I think Armenian industries are doing very well, the software industries are doing very well. I think we can really talk about joint ventures, because end of the day, how is it that you would make a defense cooperation a more stable vector in your foreign policy, in our foreign policy, is by building trust and reliability.
Definitely.
And it is not just us capitalizing on your defense requirement, it's also you capitalizing on the fact that the Indian defense ecosystem gives you these solutions where I think the trust and reliability factor can be really worked upon in very tangible ways. So I think there is much to talk about, and I hope this is only the first of many conversations that you would have with many other Indian scholars.
Swasti, thank you so much for joining us today, for accepting our invitation, and for being in Armenia for the Yerevan Dialogue Conference. I think this was a very interesting and very productive interview and a conversation. I think Armenian consumers received a lot of information and a lot of analysis that they would need from India. So any last words?
Well, my last words would be that I do feel very privileged and honored actually to be the first Indian here. And I truly, sincerely believe that this is just the first of many conversations that you should have with many more Indian scholars and also with Armenian scholars. And this is a conversation that is going to go in the longer haul. So it's all the best for that.
Thank you. Հարգելի հեռուստադիտողներ, շնորհակալ եմ մեզ միանալու համար, ինչպես միշտ կհանդիպենք յուրաքանչյուր կիրակի 19:00-ին։